Hey folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, we got a doozy of a guest today. We got the main man back, and he's here to tell us why the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl and why he loved your column so much about Jared Goff that he doesn't get enough respect. I think Dave is even coming around on Jared Goff being maybe not Patrick Mahomes, but I don't know, second best quarterback in the league. Is that where we're at now?
No, not even close. And, I got to be honest. I read the first 3 times Carlos wrote about Jared Goff being disrespected. I didn't read this last one. So, yeah, it's been no, look, I mean, Jared, he had a good season last year. Obviously, second half of the season, he, wasn't great early on. Lions were 1-6 early on. And
that was the defense.
It wasn't, but he also had turnovers, and he stopped that in the second half of the year. And that's a big reason why the Lions, those final 10 games, went 8-2. And I guess so the point being, if he plays like he did those final 10 games, the entirety of this season, the Lions are going to have a pretty good team this year. And he's had a good camp so far. I'm anxious to see what he does in year 2 of Ben Johnson's offense and see what that offense does. And, with some of the young talent around him now, but certainly not in Patrick Mahomes' class as a quarterback yet, though we will see less than a month from now, those two square off.
I can't believe it's here. Real quickly before we get to before Carlos takes over this segment with Dave, which I hope he does. After at the second half of the show, Carlos, we're going to talk about Big Ten expansion, the fact that Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA are now part of the Big Ten, which is kind of weird and interesting and crazy, and who knows? But we'll get to that later. But yeah, let's get back to the Lions winning the Super Bowl and the parade coming.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I'm not saying that, but that's what Carlos is saying. I've been amazed at the positivity lately.
I would be. I mean, God, look, we all know, right? There's that would turn this town upside down. If the Lions had that type of season. I mean, I think they're going to be a really good team. I don't know. I'm certainly not predicting them to be Super Bowl champs, but you win your division, you get a home playoff game. I guess you're not all that far away, right?
Are they gonna? I mean, as Shawn, supposedly I'm the one with the hype, but Shawn wrote about the fans and the sellout, first time ever, the season ticket holders, and all this other stuff. I mean, but that's as real of a sign that these people have bought in, because I mean, buying season tickets is a big deal, but also it guarantees you get the first shot at playoff tickets, which is going to be really hard to get if they win the division and host a game. I mean, that place will be insane. It's already gotten really loud on their way to that impressive finish last year. I can't even imagine them hosting a playoff game at Ford Field. I mean, they've been there for 20 years, and I mean, is that it? Now? If they win that game, that would be even crazier. But isn't there something also to, they haven't been there in a while? This regime has not been there in the playoffs. Winning a game's not that easy in the playoffs, right? Even if you're playing at home.
Well, I can't imagine it just because of all the extra work it would feel like. You know what I mean? That's, for me, that's just, I would be out there by myself, much like I am in training camp here all the time. Since it's rare that I see your two smiling faces.
You've seen me a decent amount.
I've seen you a few times for sure. Yeah. Carlos has been out here like maybe 4.5 hours total. So ask a question and leaves. Though I was happy to see him on Tuesday. Look, I mean, again, it's, someone had asked me this question a couple of years ago, like, could you see the Lions winning the Super Bowl in the next 10 years or something, right? And I said, you can't predict a Super Bowl win. There's so much that has to go right for a team for something like that to happen. I mean, this is, the Lions have put together a good roster, and give Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell credit. They have a young nucleus. I mean, Brad's done really good with the drafts, keeping the talent coming, and that's really what you need, is to stack 1 or 2 or 3 good drafts together. So, you start from one level and you grow, and that talent, as it becomes older and starts to get paid and just gets better in the NFL, that's when you start having some playoff success. So could I see the Lions winning a playoff game, and how difficult is it? Of course they could. And if you're at home and you look across the NFC, I mean, the Lions should have one of the best rosters in the conference. That's not that, it's not that tall an ask, I don't think, for this team, even though it hasn't happened in 30 years, having a home playoff game. But, it's a big. I think it's a big leap to go from there to planning that parade in Vegas that you guys were talking about.
Wait, the parade's not going to be in Vegas. It's going to be here.
Parade after Vegas, reaching Vegas and having the parade.
No, I know. I don't have any idea. Obviously, I mean, none of us do, Dave. But and Carlos and I have talked about this on and off for the last couple of weeks. Just that it's what's really. It's hard to fathom. Your point about the Super Bowl not being that far away from winning a playoff game, right? One game, basically.
Right. You need 3 wins, right?
Right. And you don't think about
the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it seems like such a long journey. It seems unfathomable around here because of the history of the franchise. And so the psychic leap is enormous. It's like crossing the universe. And that's what's hard to get your head around. But it's really one game if you think about what the expectation is for this year to get to a home playoff game.
That's right. It's 3 wins in the postseason, stringing 3 really good games together. And we've seen, the Giants go from the 6th seed to doing it when all things, fell into place for them. But I will say this, and you guys know this, right? That it is a pretty big leap, from being a wild card or one of those teams that squeaks into the playoffs to being, a conference championship caliber team, right? You look back at the AFC playoffs last year and okay, we knew it was going to be the Chiefs or maybe the Bengals or right. There's a handful of teams that it was definitely going to be, and the Chargers made it. And did anyone really think they had a shot to reach the Super Bowl? No. So, let's see how these next few months play out. But if you're winning the division and have a home playoff game, you're within spitting distance of reaching a Super Bowl at least.
I'm going to say this: I think that the Lions will play in a Super Bowl in the next 10 years and even earlier than that, like 8 years. Because if they keep this regime together, I think that's what should give people the most confidence. That Dan Campbell is figuring out which coaches he needs to keep, who works on his staff, how they work with players, who to hire, who isn't working and making a decision quickly when things aren't working and not holding on, not, having this weird loyalty to coaches and players and whatever. He's figuring that out. That's a big part of being a head coach. And Brad Holmes definitely is doing a good job acquiring talent, and he's learning his way too. We'll see how the Jameson Williams thing shakes out, but he's got to learn his way too a little bit. They're both off to good starts. If they keep this regime together, I think they have a very good chance of getting to a Super Bowl. Winning one, who knows? It's hard. It's different vagaries that would ever change the outcome of the game. But also the big thing too is the quarterback. And that's why, the question is with Jared Goff, this is essentially a contract year for him, right? I don't think he's going to get extended this year, but he has to show enough. If he plays well this year, they're going to have to extend him next year in his contract, in his walk year, right? So he's playing for a lot. But if it's not Jared Goff, then you got to go find somebody. And as Brad Holmes has said, it's easier to get, worse at quarterback than to get better, which is true of everything in life. But still, that point is valid about the quarterback. So I think he wants to they both want to be able to keep Jared Goff if they can. They like him. They trust him. He's played well. But the quarterback position, I think, is going to determine a lot in the immediate future, the next few years, if they can get to a Super Bowl. But if they keep acquiring talent, if they keep coaching this way, I think they have a very good chance to get to a Super Bowl in 5, 6, 7, within that 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Well, when you say they have a chance to get there in 10 or 8 years, that tells me that you think they can get there in 2, because, that's the window of opportunity for teams in the NFL. It's not 8 or 10 years. The Lions are in their window of opportunity right now.
Why? Hutchinson's young. They just got a new running back. They have,
look back at the history of the NFL, right? Unless you have Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady.
Ask. That's a big ask, Dave.
All right, Lomas. Look, it's not because, listen, if in the history of the NFL, the only teams that have that 10-year window are Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and the very elite quarterbacks, and the Lions don't have that right now. And they're building that type of roster, right? Those are the type of teams that sustain it for a decade. Otherwise, your window to win is short. And yes, the Lions have a lot of young talent, but they got to start paying that young talent next year. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to need a contract extension that's going to pay him $25 million a year next year. Penei Sewell, you don't have to do it next year because you have the 5th-year option on him. but Penei Sewell is going to need a contract extension. Aiden Hutchinson down the road is going to need one. Jonah Jackson, if they're going to keep him this offseason, if they're going to keep that offensive line together, right? Taylor Decker is going to need another one before long. So the window that the Lions have to win is right now in the next, let's call it 3 years. And that doesn't mean that they can't extend that window a little bit. But when I look at what the Lions did this offseason, that told me that they agree with that thought, because their first 4 draft picks are guys that are going to contribute immediately and play in position value. Be damned, it doesn't matter if we're going to have to pay these guys in 4 years or 5 years or what's going to happen with the second contract. Brian Branch and Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell and Sam Laporta, all lesser positions in the NFL, but they're all going to play big roles for the Lions this year. And then, signing a Teddy Bridgewater insurance piece. The Lions, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, they've accelerated their rebuild enough to be in their window to win right now.
So I think the title of this podcast needs to be Birkett says Lions' window of winning is already closing. Even though they haven't even made the playoffs, the window's closing.
No. But this is the start of it right now. The start of it. But my point is, those windows don't last for 8 or 10 years.
No, it's okay, hope. Dave. Carl's isn't really. It's. How do I say this and be nice to my brother, who I love very much here? It's just not really thinking sometimes about the larger stuff and how things fit in, and that's okay.
Shawn's going to use the word zeitgeist pretty soon.
That's okay. But in all seriousness, before we let you go, tell us what you've seen from camp, who's standing out. You mentioned Gibbs real quickly, and I was thinking about this yesterday, watching him and thinking. You mentioned Brad Holmes, and somebody mentioned Jameson Williams. Maybe that was Carlos. Williams may or may not work out. I don't know. Let's say he doesn't work out. The fact that Holmes went right back and moved up in the draft in the first round to get a playmaker who just coincidentally is also from Alabama. I thought that was actually took a tiny bit of courage in a way. You know what I mean? He's not going to shy away from being bold, making a move in the first round, despite the fact that the first time he did it, the guy may not work out at all.
Yeah, and bold move. I mean, obviously Gibbs he traded back this time.
Right. Gibbs looks like he will at least provide something.
No, I mean, I think your point is fair, right? Like it was unconventional to take a running back at 12, and especially Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. And, for that matter, I mean, Sam Laporta is, you don't see a ton of tight ends taken in the top 34 or a ton of inside linebackers taken in the top 20, like Jack Campbell was. So Brad doesn't care about the narrative. And, I mean, all those guys, look, this is part of, I guess, why, I don't doubt that the Lions' windows last more than 1 year, and maybe it's a little bit longer than I'm giving them credit for. But because they have so much young talent right now, Gibbs is going to play a key role. Laporta looked pretty good in the joint practice Tuesday against the Giants. I mean, they've got Aiden Hutchinson was one of 5 rookies who played last year on defense, and I don't know what Malcolm Rodriguez is going to become, or how big a role Josh Paschal will have. He'll be a rotational guy up front for sure, but they have a couple anchors in Sewell and Hutchinson, and who knows, maybe a Gibbs. But they're a pretty deep roster right now, and especially when you compare it to the rest of the NFC.
Yeah, I think that, to me, the window, I understand what you're saying. You're right. Right now what they're thinking is, let's do what we can right now. Like, let's fill these holes. We've added to the roster with some young players and everything. We restocked it, and they're still building to some extent. But this is the beginning of that. I think they're still just at the beginning of getting to be a good team. So when you're just beginning that, depending on what happens to Goff, he's still, what is Goff? 28? He's still actually pretty young. It feels like he's been around forever, but he could easily have another 5-6 years in him where he's, close to his prime. Or, Hendon Hooker takes over, or Teddy Bridgewater takes over, whatever. There are a lot of possibilities here. And as we found out, with Swift and Jamal Williams, they were willing to just, hey, let's clean house. These guys are, contracts are expiring, whatever, and we can find somebody else. We can get a different free agent. We can always, there's always the draft, by the way, Dave. You can always draft people and have them come in and do well for you. So, I think that the signs are there, and I don't want to crown these guys as, Holmes executive of the year, Campbell coach of the year, whatever. But there's a lot of promise there. I think that's what should give people confidence that the ship is headed in the right direction from the executive leadership forward. And then it's a matter of just keep doing that. But you got to like those chances, right? When the best franchises that have won, yes, they've had some key players in place, but it's also the personnel departments and the scouting departments and keeping those rosters churning, not always finding, like the Patriots, right? Taking Kyle Van Noy, who was garbage here, and turning him into like a Pro Bowler in New England or close to it. So being able to do that kind of stuff, I think that extends your window. Yeah,
no, Carlos, you're right. I mean, Goff he turns 29 this fall, so he's still young, right? I mean, Jim Caldwell used to say quarterbacks get better in their 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th years.
17 feet for Stafford, I think, yeah.
So, and we, Goff has grown and improved as a quarterback. And so I do think, he's trending up, he's in that, that as a quarterback is where he's headed. I don't know that he's ever going to reach that level where he can absolutely carry a team. And, that's part of, the next challenge, I guess, for Brad is, Brad said something this spring about, like finds drafting easy and, it's easy to find players. And, he seems to have proven that. But the next step in this team building process is, making sure that you're paying the right players and keeping the right players around. And Jared's another guy that's, you're going to have to pay him, or if you don't pay him, then you're going to have to be right on that Hendon Hooker pick. So, I really like where the Lions are, where they've come from, the trajectory they're on. But there are some obstacles, I guess, that, naturally come your way in building a team in the NFL that he'll have to maneuver around, in order to keep this thing and sustainable, and in order to make the Lions, this team that we all think they can be for, years to come.
I can't think of an example where a team's been relevant and had an opportunity for a decade and not had close to an all-timer or a quarterback or one of the best quarterbacks of the moment, right?
I mean,
what's that?
Well,
you mean just looking good for a decade?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. The window being 10. And Dave is absolutely right. There's no example. The closest maybe are the Steelers, but Roethlisberger was awfully good, and that
defense was amazing.
And they combined what Carlos is hoping, not hoping, but thinking the Lions might be, which is great at evaluating and signing and being savvy year in and year out with the roster. But Roethlisberger was still really, really good. Right.
No, absolutely. And he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. And maybe some of that is, the team's success or whatever. But you're right. You think back, even in our own division that we've covered for years here, right? It was Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Right. That's why Green Bay was able to sustain their success for so long. 3 decades of having a first ballot, Hall of Fame
Eli Manning, the Giants.
Well, they weren't great every year, right? They dipped and they were up and down.
They were,
I mean,
2 Super Bowls.
Right. But what happened in between? And that doesn't mean that that you can't have these spikes up and down and what happened, how the success that you have and revisit it, but to be a sustainable. They won the Super Bowl when they went 9-7 as a wild card. That's when they won the Super Bowl in 2011. They didn't make the playoffs the 2 years before that. Right. So they, and then they missed the playoffs like 5 straight years after that. So, and hey, look, Lions fans after 60 years of nothing, they would take that. But, it's difficult. It's more difficult to sustain that over time, as Shawn said, without having Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, a Patrick Mahomes.
Tom Brady and the Patriots, they thought they had Drew Bledsoe. That was their guy. Brady was an afterthought. And look what happened. I mean, maybe Goff is their Bledsoe and maybe Hendon Hooker is their Brady,
Maybe that would.
I mean, you never know. But before you go, because I know you got to get out, you got to get back out to practice. Tell us what you saw from the joint practice with the Giants, and just overall, who's made an impression on you a couple of weeks into camp here.
And also, by the way, balances by not just hype, but also who has struggled, who needs to do a little bit more.
Yeah. You talking about like on the writing side who needs to pick up a little more slack?
No, we both know.
No, look, I mean, I think it's the usual suspects, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown has been great. He's Jared Goff's favorite target. Aiden Hutchinson is having a really good camp. He looks primed for a big season. If the offensive line stays healthy, that offense is going to be really good. The sort of maybe the under the radar names, and he's not quite as under the radar, but Brian Branch, I'm telling you, that guy is going to play right away and play a big role as a rookie, and he's going to play in the slot, and that's probably going to make C.J. Gardner-Johnson play as a deep safety a little bit more than maybe the Lions envisioned when they signed him, because Brian Branch is just always around the ball doing the right things. Maybe that means fewer snaps for Tracy Walker, but I think Brian Branch has been a real standout early on. 2 undrafted rookies who have a pretty good shot of making the team are Starling Thomas, cornerback, and Dylan Drummond, the wide receiver. They both continue to pop, even held their own against the Giants in the first joint practice. The biggest concern for me, I guess, is probably the receiving core. After Amon-Ra St. Brown, Khalif Raymond has been the second best receiver. We'll see what Jameson is when he comes back, after 6 games, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, if those 2 guys end up being like the Lions' second and third leading receivers, and that's a tall task for
you.
Rookies.
Read my column. This is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, really, there's just a lot of unanswered questions at that position. Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones, Denzel Mims, veterans, but Marvin's at the backside of his career, and Josh Reynolds has had kind of a quiet camp, and so the other thing that could throw a wrench in the works, and this is the case every year, but an offensive line, and specifically to that, an injury, and specifically to that offensive line, because the Lions, Jared Goff the Lions were very good when blitzed last year, but Jared Goff was like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL when actually under pressure. And so a lot of that is just because the offensive line is so good. And so they need to make sure that they've got 6 really good players up there, that they keep that thing healthy and humming, because that's really the key to their offense.
To Carl's point, though, who's, what'd you say, it's struggled? Who's not? I mean, obviously Jameson Williams is trying to find his way, but
yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, no, I mean, look, JMO was, the drops have been a real thing at times. He's a body catcher. He's not a hand catcher. And so, he's got some of those things show up in camp. And that's kind of why you wonder, like, is he ever going to live up to his potential? It's very early. Certainly, I wouldn't write him off. I don't think anyone should. But, he has more to prove. That unit in general, that's, I guess I'm saying that maybe that's a weak link just because no one has jumped out yet. Josh Reynolds has had a quiet camp. Marvin Jones was hurt to start, training camp. So that's a big question. I mean, wouldn't say he struggled necessarily, but like players that have been on this roster for a year or multiple years and been in bigger roles in the past that won't have as as bigger roles, or maybe face uncertain futures. Malcolm Rodriguez is probably their 4th linebacker right now, and he started last year, and maybe that speaks to the depth more than like a real fall off in his play. But I think it's Anzalone's a starter, and then either Derek Barnes or Jack Campbell. Julian Okwara is a guy who he's going to have to show something here the last couple of weeks to make sure he makes the roster. Hasn't struggled, same thing, but just doesn't pop like maybe you hope. So James Houston has been running with the 2s. And again, that speaks to the depth, right? Charles Harris is back, but maybe some people when last season ended looked at the Lions and all those rookies they had playing and said, wow, James Houston is going to be a starting pass rusher, and Malcolm Rodriguez is going to be a starting linebacker. And now they're going to be backups. And, again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that speaks to what, Brad and Dan have built here.
Carlos, anything else before we let our fella go?
No, I just, I appreciate his time. I think, and mostly I appreciate that he found earbuds with a microphone. So I thought he was going to show up 10 minutes late without earbuds and say, I'll give you 3 minutes and I got to go to practice. And how many stories have you already written? It's in the morning now, but 3 stories already?
None today yet, but I did transcribe, Dan, before I hopped on here, because that way I can head right out to practice. And nothing, he didn't say anything newsworthy. So Wednesday morning, quiet morning so far.
By the way, one of my favorite things was Tuesday, the beginning of the joint practices with the Giants. One of the very few times I've been to Allen Park this year, Dave.
Right.
He was vibrating.
I'm aware, believe me.
Yeah, he was vibrating. I think he was going to break that podium. I mean, he was out of breath. It felt like he'd probably done like 100 up downs before he came in. He was the most charged up I've ever seen him.
No doubt. He was excited for joint practices. And I'll tell you what though, guys, like watching that the first day of practice, like, and Dan said, somebody asked him today, like, do you coach energy in your team? And he said, no, that's just the type of players we have. But whether he coaches it or it rubs off or that's what they have, like you could see it from the Lions players.
Absolutely.
They would make a play. You know, the offense makes a play. There's 15 defensive players on the field celebrating with them. And I maybe I wasn't following the Giants quite as close, but I didn't see that from the Giants.
No,
and so that's just sort of the, you know, it's the vibe. That's the way they walk with their chest out now, right? Knowing that they're good. That's the energy that they have. A lot of that is due to Dan. A lot of that is due to those players. But
it's
that's
interesting.
Part of the reason why I buy into what the Lions.
But it's also interesting that comes from Dan, but it also comes from Aaron Glenn. Offense isn't quite the same because Ben Johnson is not that. He's the most subdued guy there is. And you don't see that excitement quite from the offense as much as you see from the defense, which, you know, yeah, maybe they're mirrors of their coach that way. And Dable's about as chill of a coach as you find. So watch the Giants are going to win the Super Bowl now. Watch.
I think defensive players in the NFL, you know, you gotta be a little special to play defense in the NFL because man, it's so violent, right? You got to love that contact and that physicality, and so maybe that comes with offense and defense in general. But Ben Johnson, when they hit that one touchdown yesterday, it might have been the one to Jahmyr Gibbs. You know, he was fist pumping, and everyone was pretty excited about that one. So the way the Lions are carrying themselves right now,
it's different.
They know they're a good team and they expect to be contending for the Super Bowl.
It's different. I mean, we talked about it during the practice. I mentioned to you, Dave, I said, there's just so much life on the sideline. I thought about writing about it, but I didn't want to because you know how your mind, you play tricks sometimes and you start comparing to things that get a little fuzzy in your memory, but it was noticeable. It was noticeable. Mm-hmm. And clearly there's some carryover from Carlson's point about Campbell at the podium to that team. He has some kind of effect on them, whether it's intentional or not. I mean, because they were hopping around. And you're right; it's the body language and how they're carrying themselves. You know, we'll see what how they handle if they have their tough stretch of the season, which they surely will. But in any case, all right, man. Thanks for joining us. We miss you're in a studio with some foam on the walls, soundproofing, which is nice. Remember when you and Carlos and I used to squeeze in there for videos?
That's right.
Back when that was a different era. But in any case, we'll see you soon in Allen Park. All right, we look forward to getting you back here
one of these days. I'll see you guys in November, no doubt.
No.
I'll see you. Yeah, I'll see you in October.
Well, of course,
probably
you'll see me. And we'll see you soon. We'll get you back in there in the podcast real soon, right. And we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. That was a great conversation as always, Carlos. You were wrong. I hate to be the one to point that out, but Dave just makes a lot of great points.
I think he made great points that totally submarine what you were talking about. I mean, he's always just on point. He's always on my side, Shawn. You know that. I mean, he pretends to like you more, but he knows I'm right. So at least the listener can decide.
So we're saying that we shouldn't have him on anymore because he's disingenuous. He's pretending. Is that what you're saying?
He's pretending to like you, like most of us. So yeah, if you're that insecure about how much you need to be liked, sure, we can.
No. I'm just saying. It's amazing to me. You think he's not authentic, but after that performance that he just put on. By the way, do you really think the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl?
Of course. Why not? Actually, you know what? It was funny. I was looking up these the stats or betting things, whatever it was, and they were like, I don't know where they are, like 7th or 8th best. Like they have the best odds to win the Super Bowl, which of course the odds are really. it doesn't really mean that they have statistically that great a chance. It's just the betting. It's just how many people are drinking the Kool-Aid and betting on that team. Yes, it has something to do with performance and expectation, but it's mostly to reduce the risk for the sports books is what a lot of that comes out to. I think especially in the Lions case where they haven't really even been to the playoffs. So, but could happen. What do you think? You already have your Super Bowl party ready to go, right?
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's like we were talking about in the last segment. They're not only are they going to get to the Super Bowl, they're going to win it, and we're not going to know what to do with ourselves. No, I don't know if I said that or not. I can't remember. We got so wrapped up there. Oh, okay. But speaking of odds, and speaking of hype, Michigan comes in ranked number 2, and as we said at the top of the show, we're going to talk about the Big Ten and the Big Ten expansion, and why some of these formerly Pac-12 teams want to be part of the Big Ten, and it's because of schools like Michigan and of course Ohio State, to some degree Penn State. And just the interest in this part of the country. College football just plays differently here, and I was thinking about this the other day, Carlos, because I was at Schembechler Hall, and the players there, JJ McCarthy spoke, that they all have one goal, and that's to get back to the playoff and win it. And I know this doesn't have. We'll get to the expansion here in a second, but I wanted your thoughts real quick on where they're ranked. Is number 2 justified to you? Is it, as Blake Corum said, title or bust this year, national title or bust? And by the way, I was at Schembechler thinking, I can't remember the last time Michigan had this kind of expectation, and they feel like an afterthought because the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl. And it's
not so Michigan fans who are Lions fans.
No, for sure. And they're all over the country, and there are plenty of them here probably, although probably not too many Michigan fans that are here that are also Lions fans, but they're certainly spread around the country. But it's interesting. You don't often see a Michigan team this good, at least at this point. Maybe it'll change once the games play, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Oh no, I think Michigan's been right there. The CFP, right? Last year and the year before that, and the Big Ten titles are going to go for they've never won 3 straight Big Ten titles in a row. So they're doing that. They're humming. They've been, kicking or punching Ohio State in the kisser. They're going on all cylinders, but this doesn't come out of nowhere. This has been going on for the last 2 years. Now they're entering their 3rd. And I think, as you wrote that love letter, JJ McCarthy, pointing out what most people did not understand is that quarterbacks need to use their arm to win games. Very
does Jim Harbaugh understand that, or is he going to wait until the end of the year to let?
When he reaches the column, he'll understand that probably. But yeah, let JJ be JJ, right? From what we saw, he should if he takes the restrictor plate off a little bit, right? You're right. He needs to be able to let him throw downfield more. But yeah, I think people are really excited. And Lions, hey, all the hype, all the whatever. Let's see if they actually win the division. It's not exactly, I don't think it's going to be quite the cakewalk people think.
No,
we still have the Vikings.
No, of course not. No, as Jared Goff pointed out, your guy.
My guy,
who you don't think gets enough respect, as we talked about in the first segment of this this just warm and beautiful show. I think I think, oh God, now you're confusing me here, Carlos. But the point is, McCarthy needs to throw a little bit more, and I think that's the emphasis in training camp, as he talked about the other day, right? So they've been working on the pass game a lot more, because against the best defenses, you have to be able to throw the ball. You just do.
Well, do you think? At number 2, just behind Georgia, do you think that's too low? Where should they be? It makes sense to me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, it's you're just splitting hairs at that point. But I think, let me put it this way: I think people would be more surprised if Michigan didn't get to the college football final, at least, than they would if they didn't get there at all, or they would be more surprised probably that Michigan. They'd be less surprised for Michigan winning the national title, less surprised than if the Lions got to the if the Lions, I guess they'd be less surprised if the Lions didn't win a playoff game, because they haven't won one yet, and that's still a little bit of a hurdle. But I'm sure the Free Press loves to do their books. You're probably already writing the preface or whatever to our Free Press. Wolverines 2023 college football champs.
It's already written. It's already written. I mean, I haven't written it, but it's baked into the system.
Yeah, you're. What do you think? I mean, is it? I mean, Blake Corum, national title or bust. Come on, if they get there, if they get to the championship game, yes, of course you want to win it. But just getting into that tournament, even though it's going to expand, just getting in that tournament says a lot about you're in the elite class, and getting into the semis or the final, says even more about you. Michigan fans have to be happy. I mean, it's so hard to win the national championship. When TCU kind of comes out of nowhere, sort of, and gets there, a lot of different things can happen at that point in the season. Guys who aren't playing and, whatever, don't want to hurt their NFL stock, this and that. Not too many of those when you get to that level, I think, but still there's some injuries, other vagaries, opponents, unfamiliar opponents, all these different things when you get to that level and that part of the season, a long season at that point for these guys. So I think you'll be happy. If you're a Michigan fan, get us to the CFP. We're going to write that check.
It's just amazing how much it's changed psychologically the last couple of years, and the way they're thinking about it. I mean, they beat Ohio State twice.
Oh, yes.
And the win on the road. The win on the road was really
crushing.
It was really something. And I think that's definitely changed things. And the expectations, there've always been expectations, but the way they feel, I think, for a lot of Michigan fans are different, and that's fun for them, and it's fun for us in a way. But look, enough about Michigan. We're talking about Michigan all fall. The bigger story here, at least nationally, and maybe even locally, is the Big Ten expansion. Our colleague and pal Graham Couch up at the Atlantic State Journal wrote the other day that the Big Ten is basically just a bully.
Yeah,
and picking off the biggest brand names out of the Pac-12. We've seen other national writers talk about it's just based on greed and incompetent conference commissioners. The fact that the NCAA is sort of toothless in all this, that there's no one body that can plan out and get together and organize. It's just sort of a haphazard system that's with the television networks at the top that they're dictating how they want everything to be aligned and who they want to broadcast, and that it's all money, 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 greed, 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 and or bully, as Graham wrote. I'm just, what are your thoughts on the fact that all of a sudden the Big Ten has, let's just remind everybody, USC and UCLA agreed to this last year. They're coming in next year. Now Oregon and Washington are coming in with them next year. So that's 4 teams on the West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, Graham wrote a really good column, very interesting. He gets into the money, and that is what this is all about. And it's really, growing up on the West Coast with the Pac-10 in my day, and in my day, people talked about the Pac-8, but it was the Pac-10 when I grew up. And to see what is happening to that conference is sad. And I have friends out there and, big UCLA fans, big USC fans, people who went to those schools, and my family, my friends, all that. And it's tough, I think that, nobody's so naive now to think that there was no way that this could ever happen, and these conferences are sacred and nothing will ever change. I mean, you had Colorado and Utah State in the Pac-12, so things change. People understand that, but this is such a fractured idea, and I know you've written about that a lot, and it's just a plane ride and this and that, and you're still going to have the marching band. You won't care, And I always counter that with, just imagine if Michigan and Michigan State got plucked out and were out if they were sent to the Pac-12, and it just would be different. It doesn't feel right in many ways in my gut. But this is the Wild West. I mean, NIL is part of this, but also the streaming rights. I mean, as we go through this writer strike right now, That's all about, fair pay and compensation through these streaming services. Nobody knows what to do. The system is changing for television, for movies. When you have a lot more different, media out there, streaming services. I mean, no, that hasn't shaken out, and it may take a while for that to happen. So I think people are kind of, and the Pac-12 they haven't had the best, I think, guidance under their commissioner. They haven't had the right, I mean, I think Graham got into this, that they were maybe going to strike a deal with Apple TV for TV rights, broadcast rights. And now they're only getting 50% share of the media rights deal this year. But in the next one, or not this year, but in this current deal, and then it'll get to a full share after this, people are trying to grab the money while they can, But I mean, I think Cal and Stanford are probably going to join the ACC. I mean, it's just nutty. It just doesn't, I mean, that's even more of an atrocity. It just doesn't make sense to me anymore. And it's one of the reasons I'm never been a big college fan, is a lot of this is built on that idea of the, purity, sanctity of college football, the college experience, all that. And there is something to that. If you've been a kid in college, if you can remember that time, if whatever it is, it does feel a little pure, or at least it used to. And now it's just what it really has turned into and has been for a long time is, professionalism, semi-professional to professionalism for the revenue sports. So it's hard to watch. I don't like it. I think it dilutes the product. There's no reason for I think the Big Ten at the bottom of it was, if we don't get bigger, we risk getting smaller, and it's just going to be the SEC and the Big Ten, and that's it pretty soon. Maybe the Big 12 will hang on a little bit longer than anybody else, but it's going to be maybe they'll just get rid of conferences. I don't know. It's such a weird, fractured system now. Broken, I think, in many ways, but it's sad. But you don't care, right? You get to go out to LA. You already booked your plane trip to Seattle and Portland, so you're happy, right?
No, it's not that I'm happy, and you're right. I don't. It's not that I don't care. I just have different ideas about it than a lot of folks. I don't think the Big Ten is a bully at all, and I think it's just driven by this. This idea of amateurism, which it's romantic for a lot of people. This idea of innocence and purity because of amateurism, and that they weren't playing. And our colleague Reiner Saban, who jumped on the hype train with Michigan, by the way. So now it's really serious. But he was trying to argue that, I shouldn't say it like that. He was making the point that from his perspective that that it used to be that if you were a student on the campus, you weren't that far removed from the football players, right? Because they weren't. I mean, they were sort of like you, and that there was a connection there, and that was part of it. And I understand that to a degree. I went to a football school for a while at the University of Texas, and the games are fun. But if we're being realistic about how this has been supported for decades, it's not the feel good students that are on campus, and to some degree, it's not even the alumni, although they're the ones that provide the donor money for the most part. It's television network. Right, it's the television networks, and it's who's watching the games in Michigan. And Reiner worked in Alabama. I've worked in Alabama. The majority of people in that state that love that team did not go to that school. That's the case with Michigan fans here. With Michigan State fans, it might be a little bit different, but in other words, college football is not supported by just the alumni and the students. That's not a big enough percentage of the population. It would not survive as a national sport the way it has without interest from non-attending fans, right? So sure. That's really what this is about. When I hear the word greed thrown around, yeah, of course it's about money, but greed for whom? There are no stockholders here. I mean, this isn't about shareholders and price. And believe me, there's plenty of that in this country that we could question. I had a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, I'm not going to mention his name here, but make the point the other day that college football is a lot like our healthcare system. It's messy, and it's not that efficient, and it's unique. There's no other place like it in the world that has a healthcare system like this. I know a lot of folks here think that it's the best, but it's not according to outcomes. There are plenty of studies that show there are more efficient, better ways to do it, but it's so entrenched. How are we going to fix it? College football is a lot like that. No other culture attaches that level of sport and money to a place where we're going to say, okay, go learn how to be a mathematician or a teacher or a history, buff or whatever, a musician. We're sending young people to these places to try to become productive members of society. And, oh, by the way, we're going to attach $1 billion sports to them. We're the only ones in the world that do it. And it's a mess. And it's always been a mess. And we've lied. Lied is maybe a little strong, but we've fibbed to ourselves about what it's always been in order to enjoy it, in order to enjoy what has essentially been an exploitative system where two sports, primarily one sport in football, has supported all the other sports on campus, especially at places like Michigan. And when it's not supported, like, let's say, take Eastern Michigan, for example, their football program comes out of the general fund, as do all the sports. So there are plenty of universities like that where we're pulling money out of the general fund of the university to give scholarships when we maybe could be giving them to folks that don't have the means, that just have good grades or whatever. It's really, really messy. And so for people to get up in arms about this, I get it in a way because of the rose-colored glasses they've always been looking at this sport at, but well, I don't have the same feeling.
And we've talked about this before, as far as that, the revenue sports and college football especially, but basketball too. It's a marketing tool for the universities. I mean, there's money to be made, obviously. There has been always, through media deals and whatever. But even if you're not a big marketing, glory program, if you're a mid-major like Eastern Michigan, it's part of that whole, like, hey, this is how we get students in here. We give them something more. We give them a sense of, attachment to a university that can be passionate, something you'd be proud of. We talked about this before with the Doug Flutie effect at Boston College, where, when he played for them and that big pass and it was exciting, their applications like tripled or whatever. So that leads to, more enrollment, more contributions, higher tuition, all that. Keep that system strong, keep the enrollment going, so it's all part of a marketing tool. And that's why, maybe we've lied. We've believed the lie for so long that the universities are really good at promoting that, hey, this is all rah, and Sundays or Saturdays in the fall on campus and cheerleaders and all this other stuff. They've had a focused goal of trying to promote that. They've been largely successful. And when you go to the games, and sports are emotional, you don't think about, maybe this is part of a big system of greed or whatever. You're just there to root for your school. And it's dyed in the wool, whether you went to Michigan or not. And it's the same with a lot of big, blue blood programs. You grow up in an area, you just grow up either with an attachment from a family member or friend or whatever it is, or regional, and that's your team, and you cannot shake it. It's just in your blood. You cannot forsake the college team that either you went to or grew up rooting for, or your family did. So, there's just no way to take the rose-colored glasses off at this point. We're so far down the rabbit hole with this. But the product now is changing so much that, I don't know, people might think, like, does this make any, does Rutgers in the Big Ten make any sense? Does Oregon make any sense in the Big? It just doesn't. Penn State barely makes sense to me in the Big Ten, but things will change. Maybe people won't care. Maybe it is just about television rights. And if it's a national brand, who cares?
Yeah, you get used to it, right? Like Texas, I remember when Texas A&M joined the SEC. That's different, right? It's
wrong.
When I was at the University of Texas, the conference was the Southwest Conference, and most of the schools were in Texas. I'm trying to remember who else was in that outside of Texas. Arkansas, I think, was in
Oklahoma, right?
No, Oklahoma was not. They were in the Big 8 with Nebraska.
Big 8, okay.
Which is now the Big 12. But yeah, no, it's been, that part of it's changed, and I think it's just, adding that extra distance is what. But it's, again, because of the nature of how it's run it depends on, and I wrote about this, it depends on eyeballs on the screens and to some degree, seats in the stands. UCLA has 30,000 empty seats. So they did last year, almost most Saturdays,
oh, it's
right?
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so what are we talking about in the Pac-12 or Pac-10 as you used to know it? USC and Oregon and Washington. And that's really it in terms of just where football really, really matters. But overall on the West Coast, it's a lot like the East Coast, especially the Northeast. College football just doesn't matter that much. And it is sad. It is sad for those few fan bases out there that love football, because there are a few of them, but it's nowhere near like it is here, especially like it is in the South. It reminds me a little bit of, I mean, the Big East was a great, great basketball conference, and they were culturally, they were really, really relevant, right? In the 80s with Georgetown and St. John. And that was a different era for college basketball when they produced 3- and 4-year stars. That were on the cut back when we used to have magazines and stands, and you'd see Patrick Ewing and Chris Mullin and Mark Jackson and on and on and on and on of that era. You remember? You might have Akeem going up against Ewing or whatever. That's gone now, right? The Big East is not.
The Death of the Big East. There was a great documentary about that on ESPN.
Yeah, yeah. And so what have people done? I mean, they move on. And I think that'll happen with this too. You could argue, is it great if you play lacrosse or field hockey and you got to fly across the country now, or swim or whatever? Maybe not. And maybe it's not fair for the students that have, as Graham pointed out in his column, that have signed up right this second.
Right.
But moving forward, they're going to know what they're getting into. So maybe there are a couple of years here for students that are on and I understand that. And, you have some empathy for that, but I would have bet a lot of them are excited too, Carlos. I mean, it's fun to try something new. You're young, to go see different places. Also, remind yourself at most of these places where football is the supporter, just about everything else. Just how really unfair that's been. And I don't want to make this. I don't want to go down too far this rabbit hole, but I was talking about this with a colleague not recently. Football. Majority at the highest level, and basketball, the percentage of black versus white athletes earning the money of those athletic departments, then turn around and support and all these other Olympic style sports on these campuses that are 95% white. That's, we don't talk about that much. These folks, and by the way, they're playing the most violent game we have. And up until a couple of years ago, weren't getting paid for it in a $1 billion business. You can say they had scholarships, and that's fine. They did, but that's nowhere near. So it's just, there's been some uneasiness in these arrangements that we just gloss over and don't look at. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That you go to a campus and you got this kid over here playing this game, bringing in this kind of money, helping support this kid over here, and the social aspects of that, the demographics they're not pretty sometimes.
They're not. And it's also, it's so complicated because also those athletes in the revenue sports have a chance to go be millionaires right out of college, so that's why they're there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you get an education, but you have an incredible opportunity to, figure yourself and hit the lottery. So,
and Carlos, who else benefits from that, right? I mean, the NFL and the NBA.
Of course, right? They don't have to have minor league systems. They don't. Yeah,
exactly. The NBA has a little bit more one than the NFL, but still, right? They're taking advantage of the situation too.
Yeah, I can't wait to read your piece in The Economist.
Yeah, they got free ready-made stars. I get it. Romanticism is a powerful thing. I remember when concussions started becoming part of the discussion in football and trying to make the game safer. I remember sitting in the press box. This is 12 years ago, 15 years ago. Maybe 10 years ago, sitting next to a former colleague in a college press box, a college football game in a press box. And we're talking about concussions, and he was trying to make the point that for him, college football it was easier to watch because you knew most of the players weren't going to go on to the NFL and weren't going to keep getting their heads bashed in. So somehow he didn't mind it as much. Like at that point, he was starting to get uncomfortable with the NFL because of the concussions and the damage that a lot of the athletes feel when they retire. and that somehow with college it's only a few years. And so my point with that is that he was kind of thinking of college football as more pure. And that's right. There's so many different ways we just attach this idea of innocence to these youngsters. And it's got to do with amateurism. And I think that's why some people are upset. But Carlos, let me ask you this. I've seen lots of reaction from folks, and these are probably from fans that didn't go to the schools but love the programs, saying, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be fun watching them play Oregon. You know, it's going to be fun watching them play Washington regularly or UCLA. I mean, they'll rotate. It won't be every year, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's something to it. I think the first time, and I'm sure the schools, I mean, UCLA, I don't know what their television numbers are because it is the biggest school in California. So you have a lot of alumni, a lot of fans, of course, as well. But the TV, I mean, when UCLA plays Michigan for the first time, you know, the novelty of it, that will be interesting, but it'll wear off pretty fast, I think. And it's just you need some kind of sustained rivalry, and you've talked about that before, the cultural differences of the, you know, Seattle and Portland versus you know, Nebraska and you know, State College and Columbus. You know, they're different worlds, and it will take a long time before any of that stuff really kind of seeps into the blood and the culture of the you know, sports rivalries. But
for sure,
yeah, it'll be interesting the first few times. So,
for sure,
I think it'll wear off.
Yeah, it probably will. Well, look, again, to me, the bottom line is that college football is waning in certain parts of the country, and the Pac-12 in particular, and the football schools in that conference could feel that and wanted to be part of it. And the networks are happy to drive it, and maybe are driving it because they want the best. They want the most viewers they can get, right? So you can call that greed. It's also just business.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to put games on that people want to watch. That's really what this is all about, right? And there's collateral damage. There's no question.
Yeah.
There's no question. But to call this evil is a little, and not that you have, but is a little ridiculous. Just trying to survive like everybody else, trying to figure out, you mentioned the what's going on with streaming and Hollywood and all of that. And it's a mess. At the same time, we've never had better content. I mean, that right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's funny. All right, let's take a quick break. We went a little long there. We'll come back with wrap this show up with your favorite thing, and I'll skip mine just for time. And plus, I don't want to bore anybody anymore.
You never have any favorite things. Yes, let's do it.
Yeah. All right, we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. It's that time of the show, Carlos.
Your favorite thing, Shawn. Your favorite thing. Which is my favorite. Which is listening to my favorite thing.
Lay it out there, man. Let's hear it.
This one's easy. Last week, I discovered The Power of Pink, Shawn. No, not the Barbie movie, though I watched that too, and it was excellent. But we... as you know, our co-ed softball team for the Free Press, this season's been kind of tough. We've had a bunch of power outages and rainouts and all these other things. And I've been unavailable for a game or two. So I played in my first game of the summer season. It was like, I don't know what it was, our 5th game of the year. We only play like 8. So I was happy to see everybody again. But because I wasn't there for the first game, that's when they hand out the T-shirts for the season. And I show up, and everybody's got a pink shirt on. So a captain, our backup substitute captain, Heather, decided to pick pink shirts. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can I muster my anger, my animus, my everything that, like, you know, makes me want to play hard or whatever, that competitive spirit, wearing just a very light pastel-y pink. But it was freeing, Shawn, and it was a lot of fun. We lost, I think it was 12-8, but actually we made a nice comeback. Your BFF, Mike Elrick, had struggled with some walks, but he rallied, got some strikeouts.
Wait. I thought you were my BFF.
We're both your BFF. Come on. But anyway, it was a fun game, and it was fun to wear pink, and I embraced it. So the power of pink is a real thing, and hopefully this week we we get the W. But even if we don't, I just want to play well and have fun, which is exactly what we did last week.
My favorite thing is, I like that, Carlos. My favorite thing, I'll be brief, is, it was hard to pick. 1B would be hanging out with you at a practice, watching a game. It's the sun, right? Nice, not too hot, warm, but not too hot. I'm talking about a Lions practice course at training camp. We've missed each other there for whatever reason since the start of it. So we finally got to hook up and hang out, and you were in awe of Jared Goff, and that was interesting. If you're like you mentioned at the top of the show or close to the top of the show, he doesn't get his flowers. But no, so that was going to be my favorite thing. But I'm going to go with this. You wrote, I thought, a really fun, interesting column about golf, and a very analytical column. And you talked about approach and swing and how to play it. And I'm sorry, the name of the course escapes me. Maybe you can help me out with
the
that.
Orchards in Washington Township.
Okay, there we go. But I just loved it. I was like, oh, there, I learned something. I learned something, and that's what I enjoyed the most. And that was cool. I've been privately and even publicly to some degree pleading with you to lay that knowledge out there, and you did. And so that was definitely my favorite thing.
It's funny because when I was writing all that stuff about the variety of shots and this and that, I was like, oh man, I feel like Shawn Windsor when I'm writing this. I need to delete this right now. And I was like, no, I can't let him get into my head. Some of the people want to read this. It's a little nerdy, whatever. I'll leave it in. But if I ever write, what do you like to write? Fluid hips or whatever you like to write in basketball and all that, and soft hands and a great handle and this. If I ever do that, Shawn, just I deserve to be sanctioned or chastised by our editor.
No, I think
you.
I think that would be great. I think that would be great. All right, let's thank the people we need to thank, starting with Robin Chan, who's been patiently listening to this for what probably to him seems like hours. You know what I mean? Never says a word, never complains, just makes he does. Makes this show as good as it can be. So we definitely want to thank him, the producer and the main cog on all this, Robin Chan. Who else? Kirkland Crawford, the sports editor. Anjanette Delgado, the editor. No, right? Yeah, I don't know. They change the titles all the time.
She's executive editor, I think.
Executive editor, right? And then who else do we need to thank?
Who do you think? Nicole Avery Nichols, our main editor. So you're going to get in trouble. Yeah. This is why we're going to get canceled.
She's not the executive editor. She's the editor.
She's the editor, which makes no sense. You think executives hire, but it's perfect journalism.
Yeah, no.
Editor of the Free Press.
Yeah, right. So it's like George Carlin's old routine about word evolution and change and how they lose their power. In war, soldiers used to experience shell shock, and then it became post-traumatic stress disorder. Right, so it just we get lost in the loop of the language, and who knows what Gannett's trying to do? I don't know. Content machines or whatever. I don't know. God love them, I guess, or not. Who knows? I guess it depends on your point of view. But we're here because of them, so we should just I should stop talking and just thank these people and move on. Right? Are we done thanking people?
Where do we find the show? That's what nobody.
Let's thank you for putting up with this. And you find the show at Apple. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, Apple, Spotify, obviously subscribe. I mean, maybe it's not obvious, but please subscribe and give us a rating, give us a shout, let us know what you think. Anything else, Carlos? Are we missing anything else?
Nope. We'll have Briquette on for the next time for the Super Bowl triumph.
Yeah, so we're gonna wait. We're not gonna have him back on again until January, February, whenever that is.
February, yeah.
Okay. Well, we should be so lucky. All right, man. It was fun as always. And until next week, when we're back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.